Portwenn. Year after year of childhood happiness. But then suddenly, when he was 11, the visits had stopped. To this day he didn't know why. Something had happened between his father and his aunt. The wrong words had been spoken, maybe. Making this journey again now, with a job on offer in exactly the same village, it was difficult to imagine he wouldn't find out. The first half hour of the journey had passed. It was too hot. He thought of taking off his jacket, but he didn't want to disturb the elderly woman sitting next to him. Sometimes it seemed to Dr. Martin Ellingham that the rest of humanity was a long way off, far below, and he had to be careful not to step on them. But nonetheless, when things went wrong, he had to pick them up and move them around to where they were supposed to be. Thank heavens he could put his legs forward. It was the one thing that made the journey bearable. And yet, here they were at Reading, and a woman came along the crowded train corridor, smiled and glanced at them all, and took the seat opposite. Martin had to draw back his legs, fold them into an impossibly tight space either under the table or right back underneath his own seat. He could lean forwards a few inches, but not to either side. His legs were either tilted to the right, to the left, or back. It was impossible to think of going all the way to St. Austell like this. He'd break somewhere, or the table would break, or he'd simply explode. Sometime in the past, he thought, somewhere on earth, the designer of this train carriage had sat at his drawing board, or at his computer, and he'd looked at the data for average human height and weight, and he'd looked at his budget for materials, and he'd slid the button down the scale just as far as he possibly bloody could. He'd sat there in his spacious office, with huge windows and empty sofas, enormous armchairs, and he'd deliberately shoehorned every economy-class passenger forevermore into— He stopped himself from going any further down this track. It would only lead to feelings of bitterness. He could lean forwards a few inches. He could twist sideways to left or right, a bit. Maybe unfold his legs another inch. He hit something. The woman sitting opposite. He'd kicked her ankle. In the same instant, he caught her eye. Louisa Glasson, schoolteacher, pulled back her feet a touch and glanced at the man opposite. A large, repressed-looking type, wearing an expensive dark suit, a green and red striped necktie, and a blindingly white shirt. A man of middle years. She returned her gaze to the landscape passing outside the window. Small English villages passed by in a flash. They brought to mind her own small English village, the one she'd made her home, the one she cared about the most. Portwenn, in Cornwall. Somehow it didn't seem as English as these did. Cornwall was a different country. They even had a language of their own, and a history that was more attached to the sea and to France than to the land. She loved the school where she taught, a white-painted converted chapel on the side of the hill. The man opposite still looked at her, but she needn't look back. He'd soon tire of it, probably, if she didn't respond. Louisa was used to this kind of attention from men. She had a face that was often looked at because it was a picture, and in a lovely frame. The jet-black hair, if it was left down as it was now, fell on either side of her face in graceful curves. The peach colour of her cardigan warmed the light reflected onto her face. She had a steady brow and an easy smile that seemed powerfully alive both in her eyes and in her mouth, which pleased onlookers. Anyone would seek out her face again. The whole village of Portwenn looked at her. It was one of the reliable pleasures for residents. The men, the women, and the children of Portwenn had become altogether a better and more glamorous population since she'd been among them. Her classrooms were crammed with children aged 5 to 11 years, and they shone if they were given her attention. The drawback to being looked at was people like this stupid man on the train. Every time she glanced back from the window, there he was, staring. He should know better, she thought. Where was his charm, for God's sake? Did he think he could sit and ogle her, as if she were a jar in a sweet shop? And then it was a bit astonishing. He must be simple in the head, she thought, because he was actually leaning forward.